Hey guys, tonight we slip into the dusty sandals of a Spartan, yes, that's Spartan. You're not a warrior yet. Right now, you're just a bundle of soft baby fat swaddled in cloth, blinking at a world that is about to test you in ways no baby should ever be tested. Because unlike your neighbors in Athens, where life begins with lullabies and olive oil massages, your welcome to Sparta comes with a checklist. Are you perfect, strong, and free of any visible defects? If not, you probably won't survive this. See, the moment you're born, the elders from the local Ephes, the Spartan council, come to inspect you like livestock. If your limbs are crooked, if your cry is too soft, if anything looks off, you might be left outside on Mount Taygetus. Not for the breeze, for the wolves. A literal exposure ritual that quietly thins the herd before teething even starts. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing that. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You grow up fast in Sparta, or you don't grow up at all. If you make it past the baby test, your next few years are tolerable, at least by Spartan standards. Your mother, a steely-eyed woman with calves like braided rope, might feed you goat's milk, sing harsh lullabies about glorious death, and remind you every day that comfort is your enemy. Toys, you don't have those. Not really. Maybe a stick and a rock. Definitely a wooden sword. There's no such thing as pampering. If you get sick, no fancy herbs or healing chants. You're expected to push through or be left behind. Pain, in a twisted way, is your first teacher. By the time you're 7, your short childhood is over. The state steps in and plucks you from your mother's arms like an overgrown weed. You're now government property. Welcome to the Agage, but more on that in a moment. Let's linger here for a second. Because even before the formal training starts, your life is under constant scrutiny. You sleep on hard floors, usually with no pillow. Because apparently soft things lead to soft people. Bathing is rare. You don't use soap, it's seen as effeminate. So, yes, you smell like ambition marinated in sweat. And school, well, your education isn't about math or philosophy. That's for Athenians with their scrolls and symposiums. Here in Sparta, you learn how to endure pain, follow orders, and shout things in unison. Writing's useful only if it helps win a war. Poetry? Only if it's about killing gloriously. You might be surprised to learn that you do, in fact, sing marching songs mostly, but also war chants and hymns to Artemis and Apollo. Rhythm, after all, is crucial when you're marching 12 hours straight in full armor. One fringe theory, not everyone agrees on it, suggests that young Spartans were trained to speak as little as possible, not because they were shy, but because words were seen as a luxury. Why say 10 things when one word and a cold stare will do? Hence the term laconic, by the way. It comes from Laconia, the region where Sparta sits. And yes, being sarcastically brief was considered a virtue. But even in these early years, you're always being watched. Your posture, your reactions. If you cry when you fall, someone takes note. If you help another boy up, someone notices. It's like living inside a giant, dusty reality show where the prize is survival and the audience carries whips. You eat what you're given. That might mean barley mush, sour wine diluted with water, or a chunk of cheese tougher than leather. No second helpings. If you're hungry, and you will be, that's the point. Hunger makes you sharp. That's what they tell you. Whether it's true, historians still argue whether this strict regime genuinely produced stronger soldiers, or if it was just a particularly intense form of national hazing. Your father, by the way, isn't much comfort either. He might already be living in the barracks year-round, as Spartans do until they're 60. He might grunt in your direction during festivals. But tenderness? No chance. His role is to raise a fighter, not a philosopher. What's wild is how normalized all this becomes. You don't question it. No one does. It's just how things are. If you're lucky, you find some tiny joy in competition. Maybe you ray the fastest sprinter, or the best at wrestling in the mud. You'll earn a nod from an instructor, maybe even a rare smile. And remember, the pain is never random. Everything is designed. Even the cold floors, the hunger pangs, the scorn from older boys, they all serve one purpose: to make you less of a person and more of a weapon. Strangely, there's a sort of pride that starts to bloom. You're not like other Greek boys, with their private tutors and dainty sandals. You're a Spartan. You walk barefoot. You bleed during practice. You don't whine. Even your nightmares start to take on the shape of drills and punishments rather than monsters or ghosts. You live in constant fear of being weak, and weakness can be anything. Tripping information, hesitating before a fight, even flinching when someone hurls a stick at your face during a test. Yes, that's a real thing. Surprise pain was a common drill. It's no wonder that by age 7, most Spartan boys are lean, wary, and older in the eyes than they should be. The idea of play becomes strange. The idea of safety, a myth. And just in case all of this sounds like it might build tight bonds or brotherhoods, think again. Competition is fierce. You're always being compared. There's a hierarchy. The older boys boss the younger, and sometimes beat them. This isn't bullying. It's training. At least, that's how the adults justify it. Yet, amid all this hardness, you do start to understand one thing. Survival isn't about being the strongest. It's about knowing the rules, about keeping your head down when needed, standing tall when watched, and never, ever crying in public. Because if you cry, you're not just failing yourself, you're failing Sparta. You're 7 years old and officially inducted into the Agage, Sparta's infamous education and military training system. The word itself sounds almost elegant until you realize it translates roughly to leading or guidance. But this is no school field trip. No packed lunches. No parent-teacher nights. The Agage guides you all right straight into controlled suffering. Your childhood now belongs to the state. You're herded into a herd. Literally, Spartan boys your age live in packs called herds or ageli, supervised by older boys or young men who are halfway between mentors and drill sergeants. Your world shrinks to uniforms of red cloaks, bare feet, and barked orders. And your name? It's mostly replaced by your rank in the group. Your first lesson? Obedience. If someone tells you to crawl through mud, you crawl. If they tell you to fight, you fight. If they tell you to stay still as ants bite your legs, you stay still. Crying is not tolerated. Neither is hesitation. The goal is to wear down everything soft in you. Emotionally, physically, spiritually, like sanding a block of wood into a sword hilt. There are drills for everything. Walking in silence, standing perfectly still, dodging punches. Some days, they make you stare into the sun without blinking just to build discipline. One boy famously did that until his eyes bled, at least according to the sources. But then again, historians still argue whether that story is real or just another overcooked Spartan legend. You learn to speak less. Your answers must be brief, witty, and cutting. If someone asks what you're doing while holding a sword, you don't say, "I'm sharpening it." You say, "Preparing introductions." The Spartans don't do long conversations. They do one-liners that could cut marble. Discomfort is the norm. You sleep on a mat of reeds you cut yourself from a nearby riverbed. In winter, the river doesn't care about your toes, and neither does your instructor. Food is scarce. Deliberately, you're underfed on purpose so you learn to steal. Yes, that's part of the curriculum. You're expected to sneak food from the communal stores, or from farms, or even from other boys. And here's the kicker: if you're caught, you get punished, not for stealing, but for failing at it. The lesson: be clever, be stealthy, be successful, or be sore. It's a tightrope walk every day. To bold and you're beaten. To passive and you're labeled weak. You learn fast how to read a room, or rather, a dusty training ground full of sharp-eyed teens. They teach you combat basics early, not with fancy spears just yet. First, it's fists, wrestling, grappling. One of the fringe details that survives in obscure scrolls mentions that Spartan boys were taught to fight in silence. No yelling, no roaring, just calm, measured violence. Like punching someone while meditating. One of the worst days of the week. The cheese altar game. Sounds delicious. Right, wrong. Once a year, they hold a ritual at the altar of Artemis Orthia. A block of cheese is placed on the altar. You and your group must snatch it while older boys whip you as hard as they can. It's not a game. It's a rite of passage. Some kids don't even make it through without permanent scars. One historical account even claims a boy died during the ritual, refusing to cry out. Was it worth it? The cheese was terrible anyway. Bathing is rare. You're coated in dirt and sweat most of the year. It's part of the test. Soap is frowned upon. You get one new cloak a year. If it tears or smells, tough luck. You'll wear it through heat, rain, and frost. The same goes for shoes you don't have any. Walk enough miles barefoot over gravel and eventually your soles harden. Or they just bleed. But no one checks. You do learn to read and write, but just enough to follow orders or carve names into shields. Poetry is allowed, but only the aggressive kind. You might memorize fragments of Titius, a Spartan poet who wrote things like, "It is a beautiful thing when a brave man falls, fighting for his country." Kind of sets the mood. Your friendships are complicated. Some bonds are deep, You're suffering together, so it makes sense. But there's also a system of older mentors called inspirers who might adopt younger boys. Some scholars say this was educational and moral mentorship. Others whisper that it was something darker, the truth, still debated. But either way, every part of your social life is monitored and shaped by military goals. If you're especially bright or strong, you might be pulled aside for advanced training. You'll be taught how to hunt humans. Yes, because at the end of your agage, when you're a teenager, you'll join the Cryptia, the secret police of Sparta. More on that later. But know this, even your sneaky side is being molded now. Injury. Tough it out. One account tells of a boy hiding a fox cub under his cloak to impress a superior. When it started gnawing his ribs, he didn't flinch. He died quietly of internal bleeding. Again, historians debate the details, but whether real or exaggerated, the lesson is clear. Silence and suffering are part of your brand now. Time blurs. The agage is not a 3-month boot camp. It lasts for more than a decade. Through puberty, through awkward growth spurts, through heartbreak, hunger, and humiliation. Until you're practically carved out of stone, some boys break. They try to run away. They're caught, dragged back, and punished in front of the others. Escaping the agage is like trying to escape gravity. It pulls you back with bruises. But there are rewards. If you do well, if you endure without complaint, you might be praised at public ceremonies. Spartans love a dramatic display. A speechless teen with scars and a steady gaze. That's hero material. You might even be allowed to march with adult soldiers during processions. It's not a real promotion, but it feels like one. A sign that one day you'll be more than a trainee. One day you'll carry a real spear and eat real food. Maybe until then, every day is the same blend of drills, dirt, and discipline. Even dreams start to feel like training simulations. You wake up mid-push-up. You sleep like a coiled rope. And somehow, impossibly, this becomes your normal. You wake up hungry again. Not the kind of hunger that makes your stomach growl for an hour. No, this is the slow, burning kind that wraps around your ribs like a belt to sizes too tight. You've been living on rationed barley porridge and the occasional chunk of salted meat, but it's not nearly enough. In fact, it's never enough, and that's exactly how the elders want it. See, in Sparta, hunger isn't a problem, it's a lesson plan. You don't eat to be full. You eat to survive just long enough to be desperate. Because desperation sharpens instincts, and instinct in war is more valuable than comfort. So, after your tiny breakfast, you and your herd stumble out to the training yard barefoot, of course, because shoes are for the uninitiated, and today, the real test begins. Or distract a cook long enough to grab a fig from the supply cart. Think of it like tactical grocery shopping, with consequences. The rule is simple: steal and don't get caught. If you do, the punishment is swift. and usually painful. A beating with whips, a night with no supper, or worse, public humiliation in front of your herd. And calculate silent paths through shadows. One night, you and two others crawl on your elbows through tall grass toward a granary. Near the edge of the compound, your heart is thudding, not from fear, but from hope. If you succeed, you'll eat like a king at least for a few minutes. If you fail, well, one of the boys last week got caught and had to stand in the square wearing a goat carcass as punishment. That smell doesn't leave you quickly, but the need overrides the risk. You're so hungry your teeth ache. And, strangely, you're excited. Because this is more than survival, it's pride. Outsmarting the system makes you feel powerful in a world where you're usually at its mercy. Some sources even say older mentors encouraged this behavior, offering cryptic advice like, "The clever are never hungry." One scroll describes a contest where the winner was the boy who stole the most eggs in a week. Without being seen, another story tells of a boy who managed to snatch wine from a festival table and drink it behind a statue of ours, returning stone-faced to the ranks like nothing happened. Of course, modern historians debate how widespread this actually was. Some say it was exaggerated by later writers, who wanted to paint the Spartans as walking paradoxes, lawful thieves, silent singers, obedient rebels. Others argue it's all too real, just another chapter in a society obsessed with discipline and deception. One odd quirk: you're also taught how to take beatings without flinching. So even if you're caught, crying is not allowed. It's part of the test. Take the lash, stay silent, and walk away without a whimper. The same boy who was caught stealing cheese last month didn't he cry when they whipped his legs raw. He actually smiled when it was over. No one knows if it was pride or delirium, but he was promoted. Sometimes the stealing escalates. You're told to sneak into hellish quarters, the enslaved majority of the population, and take from their food. Riskier, yes, but if you can survive there, in the dark with angry helots nearby and guards everywhere, you're proving yourself worthy of the next level. And let's talk about the helots. They farm. They cook. They make things. The punishment is immediate. Your mentor yanks you by the shoulder, and the figs scatter like guilty secrets. You don't speak. You don't beg. You brace. The whipping comes fast. It's not the worst pain you've felt, but it's close. You don't cry. Instead, you make a promise to yourself. Next time, you'll move quieter. Watch the shadows better. Memorize foot patterns. Like a tiny general planning a siege. You limp back to your sleeping mat. Your ribs sting. Your stomach still aches. But your mind is sharper now. And that, in the twisted logic of Sparta, is progress. There's even an odd pride in these failures. Each scar becomes a story, a whispered lesson shared with the herd. Some of the best thieves become minor legends. One boy was so good. It's said he never ate official meals, just what he lifted. He eventually joined the cryptia. But that's later. For now, the rules are cruel, but clear. You may starve, but you will learn. Learn to steal, to hide, to endure. Because if you can't fight hunger, how will you fight an army? Your feet hurt, constantly. The sharp rocks don't care. The frozen ground in winter also doesn't care. And your instructors, they care so little it's practically policy. Because in Sparta, shoes are for the weak. Or more specifically, shoes are for the soft-hearted Athenians with their plush sandals and perfumed streets. You, however, are barefoot. Always. From the moment you entered the agage, you were stripped of comfort, including footwear. The philosophy: let your souls harden like your spirit. Build resistance, grit, and a lifelong immunity to pebbles, supposedly. But the reality? Your feet crack, blister, bleed. You develop the kind of calluses that could scratch marble. There's no cushioning. No foot rubs at the end of a long march. No healing salves unless you really injure yourself, and even then, you're probably expected to fix it with dirt, salt, and mental toughness. If you're lucky, someone might casually mention rubbing vinegar on your wounds. Ancient wisdom. Spartan edition. Morning drills. Barefoot. Night watches. Barefoot. Even chasing after wild dogs for training. Yep, barefoot. And here's the twist. This wasn't a form of punishment. This was considered a gift. The elders believed that shoes dulled your instincts. That comfort bred cowardice. They wanted you to feel everything under your feet: gravel, snow, blood, so you'd never forget what pain feels like. Because forgetting pain makes you careless, and carelessness gets you killed. It's all part of the bigger idea. Your body is a weapon, and weapons don't wear sandals. Still, the toll adds up. On some mornings, your feet are so swollen they barely fit under the edge of your cloak. You limp to the training ground, trying not to grimace. Of course, if someone sees the pain in your eyes, they'll likely call you out in front of everyone. Maybe throw a pebble at you, just to test your reaction time. One popular insult is you walk like an Athenian. Low blow. Absolutely savage in Spartan circles. Some boys try to cheat the system, padding their cloaks with straw and wrapping it around their feet during marches. If caught, they're stripped not just of the straw, but of evening meals. One creative kid once stuffed dried leaves into his sandals made from bark. It worked until the leaves caught fire while he sat near the communal fire pit. That story circulates for months. Historians actually debate the extent of the no-shoes policy. Some argue it was more symbolic than literal. Others believe it was enforced year-round, regardless of frostbite or terrain. There are stories of Spartans running across jagged hills, their feet bleeding but never slowing down. Was that propaganda? Maybe. Or maybe just a very committed brand image. But even modern scholars admit there's something to it. Spartan skeletons show signs of foot trauma, bone stress, damage that only comes from decades of pounding hard ground without protection. So whether the stories are exaggerated or not, the pain was real. And it's not just your feet that pay the price. Your gait changes. You learn to move differently, more like a cat across broken tiles. Quiet, deliberate. You start to feel every grain of sand, every shift in slope. It makes you aware, hyper-aware, and that's the point. You're not being trained to survive in comfort. You're being trained to fight in hell, and hell doesn't have carpets. Your instructors sometimes remind you of a tale about a young Spartan who could sprint full speed across a bed of thorns without flinching. Not because he was immune to pain, but because he believed the gods would be offended if he showed weakness in front of them. You're not sure whether the story's true, but you try to walk straighter anyway. Winter arrives eventually. Cold seeps into your bones. You huddle around fires at night, but your toes stay purple. Some mornings, you lose feeling in them completely. A few boys even lose toenails, or worse, still no shoes. A friend of yours tries to wrap his feet in strips of linen one night. He is desperate. His heels are cracked open, and even walking hurts. He sneaks out of the dorm and scavenges cloth from an old tunic. Next morning, he limps to formation. A sharp-eyed elder spots the bandages. He's ordered to remove them and run 10 laps around the yard barefoot. On gravel, you watch his feet bleed with each step, little red trails following him like shadows. He doesn't cry. He doesn't even complain. But afterward, he sits down with a sigh and says, "At least they're warmer now." You both laugh. A weak, wheezy laugh, but laughter nonetheless. Because in Sparta, sometimes the only thing you have left is your sense of humor. Even if it's half frozen, there are upsides. Sort of. Your balance improves. You start to move more gracefully. You develop a sixth sense about terrain, like you can read the land with your feet. Wet dirt means watch for slipping. Warm stone means hidden sun traps. And soft sand, usually bad news. It means something's buried there. Maybe animal tracks. Maybe worse. You also become faster. There's less weight dragging you down. When sprinting, you almost feel like you're flying until a rock clips your arch. And suddenly you remember you are very much still on the ground. But even the pain becomes part of your rhythm. One elder says, if your feet aren't screaming, you're not running fast enough. That line sticks in your head for weeks. Eventually, your feet stop hurting. Not because the terrain gets easier, but because your body simply stops registering it. Pain becomes background noise. A gentle static that never quite fades, but never distracts you either. And that's when you realize you've adapted. Your feet, like the rest of you, have become Spartan. You hear the crack before you see it. A sharp snap that cuts through the hot air like lightning without the thunder. Somewhere up ahead, another boy grits his teeth and stumbles forward, fresh red welts already rising across his back. No one flinches, not even you, because today is the festival. Well, if you can call it that. You're standing barefoot on sun-baked stone at the altar of Artemis Orthia, the goddess of wild animals and childhood transition. It is one of the major rituals in Sparta, an annual spectacle, where the boys of the Agage are publicly whipped. The crowd claps, priests chant, the air smells like sweat, incense, and cooked goat. This is not punishment, it's entertainment. This ritual is called the diamastagosis, and it is less about cleansing your soul and more about proving your pain tolerance to your community, your gods, and your government all in one neat little ceremony. You've known it was coming for weeks, maybe months, but that doesn't make it easier. You and the others form a straight line near the altar. It's an ancient stone platform smeared with blood, some fresh, some older, atop it. A block of cheese rests like a prize for the brave, or a trap for the foolish. The rules are simple. Get the cheese, survive the lashes, don't scream. If you cry, you're humiliated. If you collapse, you're carried away. If you endure it all in silence, you are remembered. One scroll calls it a theater of endurance. Another refers to it as the laughing altar, because the crowd always laughs at something. A funny stumble, a dramatic fall, the brave face of a kid barely taller than a spear. You're the spectacle, whether you like it or not. Some people say this started as a blood ritual, that the goddess Artemis demanded pain in exchange for blessings. Others claim it was a sport, a lesson, a way to separate the strong from the weak in front of everyone. Historians still argue whether it was rooted in religion or pure military conditioning, or both. All you know is that today you'll be whipped, and you can't make a sound. The older boys volunteer as enforcers. They wield long rods, flat, flexible, and designed to sting more than break. But they're also trained. They know just how to strike to leave a mark, without lasting damage most of the time. Occasionally, they must judge. A bone gets hit, a rib bruises. 1 year, a boy collapsed and never got up again. The priest said Artemis had accepted his gift. The crowd clapped anyway. Now it's your turn. You step forward, trying to look calm. But your chest is tight. Your legs feel like mud. And every instinct screams run. But there is no running in Sparta. Only standing, surviving, or failing. You bend slightly, arms behind your back, staring at the cheese as if it were a golden crown. The first lash comes hard. It slices the air and lands with a wet smack across your shoulder. Your vision flashes white. Your skin ignites. But you don't move. Second lash. Then a third. Your breathing goes shallow. You feel blood trickle slowly down your back, warm at first, then cooling as the wind brushes it. You don't know how many hits come. The world shrinks to pain and crowd noise. Someone laughs, probably a boy who hasn't gone yet, or maybe one who already has. And then, just as your knees begin to wobble, it ends. The priest raises a hand. You step back. Your body screams, but you don't. That night, as you lie on your side on your straw mat, you feel every line of pain along your back. You can't sleep, not really, but you also don't cry. You stare at the wooden ceiling and replay the sound of the lashes in your mind, over and over, like a lullaby made of thunder. Later, in the mess hall, someone nudges you. A slightly older boy. He says nothing, just nods once. You don't know if it means well done or you didn't humiliate us. Either way, it feels like praise. What's strange is that some boys want to do this more than once. Some even ask to go again. They like the attention, or the scars, or maybe the sheer adrenaline of standing tall while everyone else watches. There's an honor in it, however twisted. There's also a lesson hidden inside the lashes. You're being conditioned not just to endure pain but to expect it, to welcome it. If you can't stand calmly while being whipped in front of your entire community, you can't stand calmly when arrows fly or swords crash, or so the theory goes. But here's the curious part. Sparta didn't invent public flogging. Lots of cultures used it. But Sparta celebrated it, made it sacred, turned it into a national event, and not just for boys. The whole city shows up mothers, merchants, soldiers, even foreign guests. Some tourists from Athens once came just to watch. They left shocked. One reportedly fainted. You'd think the trauma would stay with you, but over time, it fades. The pain dulls. The scars heal. What stays is the pride. That weird, quiet pride of knowing you did it. You survived the altar of Artemis. You were whipped for fun, and you didn't scream. Sleep in Sparta isn't about rest. It's about endurance. There's no soft feather-stuffed mattress waiting for you at the end of the day. No wool blankets tucked in tight. No lullaby or bedtime kiss. Your bed is a pile of reeds or, more accurately, whatever straw-like plant you managed to hack off a riverbank and hold back before sunset. And even that comes with conditions. You're expected to collect the reeds with your bare hands, no knives, no tools. Why? Because using blades is too easy. Ripping stalks from the earth with your fingers toughens them. They say, makes your grip stronger, your wrists harder, and presumably, your dreams more Spartan. The straw you manage to drag home each week gets dumped into a little corner of your shared barracks. You might have a ragged cloak or a strip of wool, but that's more of a suggestion than a comforter. It doesn't really keep you warm. It just gives you something to wrap around your knees when the wind howls through the shutters. Like a jealous ghost. Sleeping arrangements? Communal? Always. Picture 20 to 30 boys squeezed into a dimly lit room. No partitions, no privacy, just the rank smells of sweat, dust, and barely suppressed adolescent angst. You've learned to fall asleep while someone snores a few inches from your face, and someone else mutters war chants in their sleep. And here's a fun detail. If you do manage to drift off too comfortably, you might be woken by a sharp jab in the ribs. Why? Because instructors sometimes patrol at night to check if anyone looks too relaxed. Apparently, comfort leads to softness, and softness, as always, is a sin. So you learn to sleep lightly, alertly, half watching the shadows even while dreaming. Your body, like your mind, is never fully at ease. It's one long rehearsal for sleeping on the battlefield if you ever get the privilege. What happens if you're injured or sick? Nothing. There's no infirmary with cozy beds and tea. If you can walk, you train. If you can breathe, you march. The only time you get to lie down for extended rest in Sparta is if you're dead, and even then, they might complain you're lying incorrectly. There's a strange dignity in this suffering. Older boys tell you that sleeping on reeds teaches you humility. It reminds you that rest is earned, not given. That the gods watch what you do in darkness just as much as they watch what you do in war. Still, there are moments, tiny ones, when you find odd comfort in the ritual of it all. Lying down at the same time as everyone else, listening to the familiar coughs, the occasional whispered joke, the scraping sound of someone shifting on dry stalks. Your mind drifts, and yet, just as you're about to doze off, a voice barks your name. You're up, out of bed, midnight drill. This is common. By the way, surprise inspections, random exercises. You might have to jog laps barefoot around the temple in total silence, or recite war poetry by torchlight, or simply stand still, half naked and freezing, until the instructor decides he's satisfied with your posture. You're not allowed to complain or yawn. Yawning, in fact, is seen as a failure of mental discipline. So back to your bed you go, sore, shivering, and wide awake. You roll back onto your mat. A reed pokes your shoulder blade. Another jabs your thigh. You adjust. It doesn't help. You close your eyes. Focus on breathing. Inhale. Exhale. You remember a joke one of the older boys whispered once. If you ever want a soft bed in Sparta, die a hero. The afterlife probably has pillows. Funny, until you realize he wasn't really joking. Another strange fringe detail? There was a belief that good posture while sleeping would strengthen your spine. So you try not to curl up too much. Try not to lie on your side like a baby. You sleep straight rigid as a plank because you're told it will keep your back ready for armor. Is there science behind it? Historians aren't sure, but the belief is real, and that's enough. And yes, you sleep in your cloak. You don't take it off unless it's filthy beyond reason. It's the only barrier between your skin and the prickly reeds. If you lose it, well, enjoy being a human pincushion. In the winter, cold air bites through the slats in the barrack walls. Your breath fogs in front of your face. You pull your knees into your chest, cloak over your head, and pretend it helps. Sometimes, boys cry at night. Quietly. Just a sniffle, a stifled sob into a rolled-up tunic. It's not allowed, of course, but it happens. You hear it and pretend you don't, because tomorrow you'll all stand side by side as if no one ever cracked. And that's the code. Suffer in silence. Sleep in pain. Wake up stronger. Eventually, your body adapts. You start falling asleep faster. Even if the mat is lumpy and your shoulder aches, you dream less. Or maybe just forget your dreams faster. Your mind focuses on one thing, making it to the next morning without getting singled out. Years later, when you've grown into full military service, you'll remember these nights. The straw, the silence, the midnight drills, and, strangely, you'll be grateful, because out there on rocky hills, in war camps, under foreign stars you'll sleep in dirt and call it a luxury. You'll rest on cold stone and think, this is softer than my training bed. And you'll realize Sparta never wanted you comfortable. It wanted you ready. By the time you hit your early teens, you've been training for more than half your life. You've been hungry, whipped, frozen, bruised, and barefoot for so long that it doesn't even register as unusual anymore. You're no longer a boy, not quite a man either. You're something in between sharp-eyed, sinewy, silent. A blade still being sharpened, but sharp enough to cut already. And Sparta is ready to test that edge. You've entered the next phase, real combat preparation. Because eventually, your enemies won't be symbolic. They won't be older boys holding training rods or elders barking verses about honor. They'll be Persians, or Thebans, or angry helots with nothing left to lose. Real threats, real swords, real death. And to get ready for that, you begin actual warfare simulations. Forget wooden sticks. Now it's bronze-tipped spears, actual shields, real bruises. The line between training and battle starts to blur. You and your herd begin mock patrols in nearby terrain, pine forests, rocky hills, dried-out riverbeds. Your instructors watch in silence as you crawl through mud, leap over thorn brush, and stalk invisible enemies like wild animals. 1 week, you're paired with 3 other boys for a night mission. The goal: find a hidden enemy outpost, recover a symbolic object, a helmet. In this case, and return undetected. The twist? The instructors don't tell you everything. They want you to get confused, to argue, to mess up. Because that's part of the test. Half of warfare, they say, is solving chaos while bleeding. So you crawl through shadows, guessing, whispering, feeling every heartbeat like it's a drum in your throat. When you finally spot the enemy camp, a few older trainees guarding a campfire, you inch forward. One boy distracts them. You sneak past, snatch the helmet, run like wildfire. It's exhilarating, terrifying. You return with blood on your knees and a wild grin you didn't mean to wear. You pass, sort of. They still make you do push-ups until your arms tremble. But you feel it's your first taste of actual war. And it's addictive. Then comes the Cryptia. This part isn't for everyone. It's invitation only. But if you're chosen, everything changes. The Cryptia is a secret Spartan unit, a shadow organization that patrols the countryside. And their job? Control the helots, through fear, and sometimes through death. You're told to go out at night, alone, armed with a dagger, dressed in black. You're not allowed to carry supplies. No food, no cloak. Just your training and your wits. For days, you'll stalk through helot villages, hiding, listening, watching. If you see a helot, acting suspicious, speaking too boldly, standing too tall, you're expected to eliminate him quietly. This is not war. It's control. Some say it's justice. Others call it state-sponsored terror. You're too young to know the difference. You just know that your legs cramp in the cold, and your stomach growls all night. And when you finally slip back into the barracks at dawn, you're not the same. The Cryptia is one of the darkest stains on Sparta's history. Historians still debate how much of it is myth and how much was real. But enough sources mention it that something happened in those forests. And now, you're part of it. Even if you never kill, the experience leaves its mark. You've learned to stalk, to vanish, to survive alone, and more importantly, to obey without question. And then, without much ceremony, you're thrown into real battle. Sparta doesn't keep you locked away until 20 or 30. They test you early. If there is a border skirmish or a helot uprising, or even just a festival that requires extra security, you're sent. Maybe not as a frontline soldier, but as a runner, a squire, a backup spear. You see blood for the first time, hear metal hit bone, smell fear and the unmistakable scent of sweat, dirt, and copper that follows battle like a storm cloud. You don't know what to feel. Pride, terror, relief that it wasn't you who got hurt. No one tells you what to feel, so you don't feel, not outwardly. Later, you're praised. He stood his ground, someone says. Didn't flinch. That's all it takes. One compliment in a world built on scorn. Back at the barracks, you try to sleep, but your ears ring with phantom clashing. Your hands twitch at imaginary spears. You dream of the man who fell near you, his eyes open, his mouth half a scream. But you don't tell anyone that, because you're a Spartan now. You're expected to be ready. One older warrior pulls you aside one morning. He's grizzled, silent. His nose is crooked, and his hands are missing to fingers. He hands you a new spear, longer, sharper. He says, "You've earned this." That's it. No ceremony, no feast, just a weapon and a nod. But it means everything. You've crossed a threshold, from boy to blade, from student to soldier. You've seen war, and war has seen you back, and you didn't blink. You're now a teenager with scars, a spear, and a reputation. But there's one thing Sparta hasn't trained you for: marriage. Not love, not romance. Definitely not candlelit poetry under olive trees. No, Spartan marriage is more like an awkward, state-sanctioned ambush with just a dash of ritualized kidnapping. You've been paired with a girl, or rather, assigned a wife by elders who believe matchmaking is best done by military committee. The goal isn't passion or partnership. It's procreation, strong sons, healthy daughters, the next generation of Sparta's war machine. You don't live with her. In fact, you're not even supposed to see her often. That part comes later. First, you have to go through the weirdest honeymoon in Greek history. Here's how it works. Your bride-to-be shaves her head completely. Then she dresses in a man's cloak and sandals, not to make a fashion statement, but to look like you. Spartan society prized masculine energy so much that even your wedding night involved gender camouflage. Once she's dressed like a half-sized version of yourself, she's brought to a dark room and left there. Your job: kidnap her. Yes, literally. You sneak away from your barracks late at night, moving through shadows like you're on a secret mission. You're technically still enlisted full-time in the military, so you can't be caught. If you are, it's not scandal, it's desertion. You slip into the room. Your bride is waiting. No candles, no music. Just two teenagers who barely know each other in total darkness, trying not to freak out. Historians still argue whether this ritual was meant to reduce awkwardness or amplify it. The answer is probably yes. There's no feast, no party, no parade through town. You lie beside her, in silence, cloaks rustling like dry leaves. Maybe you talk, maybe you don't. Some couples say nothing for the first few nights. Others whisper jokes, but it's always a secret, like you're breaking curfew rather than starting a family. Afterward, you sneak back to your barracks before dawn. No one must know. You wake up with the others, train like nothing happened, bleed like everyone else. Then, a few nights later, you sneak back again. This goes on for months, sometimes years. Marriage in Sparta is part spycraft, part endurance test. You don't move in with your wife until you're around 30. Until then, your relationship is a patchwork of midnight visits, silent nods, and quick glances across festival crowds. Romance, if it exists, is wedged somewhere between war drills and communal meals. And yet something strange happens. You start looking forward to the visits. In a life where every day is hard edges and harsh orders, that one moment of softness of being human again becomes a refuge, a secret oasis in a desert of discipline. Your wife, despite being a stranger at first, becomes your only real escape. The only person who doesn't bark, orders, or test your reflexes. She asks how your day was. She listens. She's strong, of course. Spartan women are no delicate flowers. They train too, not in combat, but in strength, in wit, in presence. They manage land while you're at war. They raise the children. They command households with the same authority that generals use in battle. And if you fail to impress her, she'll let you know loudly. Spartan women were known for sharp tongues and sharper expectations. One infamous line, supposedly shouted by a Spartan mother to her son, "Come back with your shield or on it." Now imagine that energy in a marriage. Your visits remain secret. You leave no trace. You never speak of them publicly. You don't boast. In fact, if you talk about your wife too much, it's considered unmanly. You're expected to keep your feelings locked away, like your rations and your sandals. And yet, Spartan society quietly depends on these midnight rendezvous. Without them, the warrior machine would grind to a halt. No wives, no children, no children, no soldiers, no soldiers, no Sparta. Some even say this secrecy made love stronger. That absence, distance, and effort turned ordinary affection into quiet devotion. Others argue it just made things confusing and stunted emotional maturity across generations. As always, historians disagree, but you know this. The sneaking, the tension, the occasional shared smile, it leaves a mark. A different kind of scar. Not the whip's mark or the spear's scrape, but something softer, more subtle. Years pass. Your wife becomes more than a shadow in the night. She's your anchor, your reminder that life exists outside the battlefield, that you are still more than just a soldier. Even if no one says it out loud, still, until you're 30, the barracks remain your home. You eat with the other men, sleep in the same cold hall, fight in the same mud. And when the stars align just right, you sneak out for a few hours of something close to peace. Marriage, Spartan style. Not glamorous, but quietly powerful. You rise before the sun. Again, there's no snooze button, no weekend, no room for asking, do I feel like it today? Because in Sparta, your life doesn't belong to you. It never did. From birth, The city-state claimed you body, time, thoughts. Every hour of your day is accounted for, shaped by a system that sees individuality as a crack in the armor. You eat when they say, sleep when they say, train how they say. Even your silence is managed. You don't get to wander the fields and chase butterflies. You don't get to skip a drill because your knee hurts. You are state property. An asset. A cog in a centuries-old machine built not for joy, but for order. Even how you look is regulated. Your hair, grown out long, especially if you're a full citizen. But not just for style. It's a mark of status. A reminder that you've earned the right to care about such things. Except you're also expected to. Keep it combed and tidy. A lazy beard or tangled locks might get you publicly scolded or worse. Shaved in disgrace. Your clothes, a single red cloak. Worn daily, no matter the season. Stained, stiff, and probably older than some hellish children. Washing it isn't your priority. Wearing it proudly is. As for your possessions, you own almost nothing. A shield, a spear, a pair of underwear, maybe a wooden cup. If you're lucky, Spartan simplicity is enforced, not admired. Luxury is weakness. If someone sees you polishing a silver ring, they'll likely take it, melt it, and tell you to be grateful for the lesson. Even your meals are communal. Always. There are no private dinners, no dining with your wife. You eat in a mess hall with 15 other men, all seated in ranks. You eat barley, cheese, olives, and, of course, the infamous Melis Zomos Spartan black broth. Think pork boiled in blood, vinegar, and salt. It tastes like despair and smells worse. But complaining, not allowed. In fact, pretending to like it earns respect. One Spartan reportedly said, "The taste improves when you're too hungry to care." A joke. Maybe. But it catches on. You don't get to choose where you go. The state tells you when to train, when to march, when to fight, when to breathe. Even festival attendance is mandatory. You don't party, you parade. You don't dance, you demonstrate discipline. If you miss a ceremony without an approved reason, you're fined, or flogged, or mocked, publicly. And travel? Forget it. Spartans were famously restricted from leaving the city unless on military assignment. The elders feared that foreign luxuries might corrupt your mind. Art, theater, philosophy. That's Athenian nonsense. You're trained to reject comfort, not seek it. Even thinking differently is frowned upon. Intellectual debate? Not really encouraged. Questioning the elders? A mistake. Asking, why do we do this? Only ends one way, with more push-ups or a sharp lecture about loyalty. There is a saying often attributed to a Spartan elder: the needs of Sparta are the needs of the man. It sounds noble, until you realize it means the man has no separate needs. But what if you're excellent? What if you outshine your peers? Run faster, strike harder, endure longer. Still, your life isn't yours. Even excellence is claimed by the state. If you're selected for honors, you're paraded like a war trophy, a symbol, not as yourself, but as a product of the system. You're admired, yes, but not for who you are, for how well you reflect Sparta. There's no retirement at 25. No break. You're in military service until you're 60. 60. That's 53 years of standing straight, shouting chants, dodging spears, and waking up on command. Even after your body begins to crack and your knees throb like old tree roots, you're still expected to serve. Maybe not on the front lines, but as a trainer, advisor, or worst of all, a judge in youth competitions. And if you do try to escape, to vanish into the hills, run to Athens, join a merchant caravan, and live among free men, you're labeled a tres-ontes, a coward, a deserter, worse than dead. Sparta makes examples of such men. They're not killed outright. No, that would be too simple. They're shunned. No one speaks to them. No one trades with them. They become ghosts, pariahs. There's even a custom where other Spartans avoid lighting a fire with wood gathered by a coward, as if shame could spread like smoke. Still, not everything feels suffocating. Some days, during long marches through sunlit fields or quiet forest patrols, you feel strangely at peace. Your muscles ache, yes, but there's rhythm, predictability, a purpose etched into your bones. You don't have to wonder who you are. Sparta already answered that for you. And maybe there's safety in that, in knowing your role, in living without choices, because choices can lead to fear, doubt, regret. Not here. Sparta is many things. Brutal, rigid, cruel, even. But uncertain, never. Your life isn't yours. And in some strange, warped way, that's exactly why it works. You're walking through a Spartan field lush, green, and buzzing with the gentle drone of insects. The sun beats down on your shoulders. Your spear rests casually across your back. But you're not here to farm. You're here to inspect. Because the hands that tend this earth, the backs that bend, the bodies that sweat under the weight of harvest do not belong to citizens like you. They belong to the helots. You've heard the name since childhood, whispered with a strange blend of contempt and caution. The helots are the enslaved majority of Sparta. They vastly outnumber the Spartans by some estimates, 7-1, but remain at the very bottom of the social ladder, trapped in a life of service and surveillance. They farm your land, cook your food, sew your tunics, raise your livestock. Without them, Sparta, the land of warriors, and glory would collapse under its own weight. And yet, they are always watched. You don't speak to them casually. You don't joke with them. You don't thank them. To do so would blur the rigid boundary between master and servant. The helots are not friends. They are tools. Breathing ones. Yes, but tools all the same. But it wasn't always like this. Once upon a time, the helots were free. Many came from the region of Messenia, conquered by the Spartans generations ago. Instead of slaughtering the defeated, Sparta did something arguably darker. They enslaved an entire population and passed that status down through generations. A helot child is born into bondage. His father tilled fields. His grandfather probably did too. And so will he? They're allowed to marry, to raise families, even to own some possessions. But they're permanently tied to the land assigned to Spartan households like living farm equipment. You don't own one helot. You're assigned several by the state, depending on your rank. Their job, feed you, while you train in spear drills or shout chants in the gymnasium. The helots wake up early to dig, plow, carry, and grind. They harvest olives and barley, stomp grapes into wine, butcher pigs. Then they carry the food to you fresh, hot, and usually unappreciated. And yet, the most unsettling part of it all, they smile. Some do, at least. That awkward, forced kind of smile. A mask worn so often it starts to fit. Because helots know that the smallest misstep, a glance held too long, a whispered word out of place can bring swift, merciless punishment. And you've been taught to expect it. Since you were a child, you were told that the helots were dangerous, that they were always on the edge of rebellion, that they had to be managed with fear, with surveillance, with violence. Sparta never relaxes its grip on them, not for a second. And there's a reason: the numbers. There are thousands of helots, tens of thousands. You, the elite Spartan warrior class, are a tiny ruling minority in a land crawling with potential resistance. One whisper of uprising, and the machine could unravel. So Sparta builds an entire system around controlling them. Public humiliation is common. Helots are sometimes forced to get drunk on purpose and stumble through the streets as a warning to Spartan youth. See? This is what weakness looks like. Others are ordered to wear ridiculous clothes, like dog skin caps or mismatched shoes. A constant reminder of their status, a performance of subjugation. And then there's the Cryptia. Remember that secret group you trained for? The one that sent you stalking through the night? Its primary target, the helots. The goal wasn't just intelligence gathering. It was psychological warfare. The elders sent boys like you into the countryside not just to observe but to eliminate. No trial, no evidence, just quiet, controlled terror. A helot who seemed too strong, too confident, too charismatic, gone. A family that whispered too often, watched. A field hand who stared a little too long, silenced. Historians still debate the full scope of the Cryptia's activities. Some believe it was exaggerated by later writers seeking to vilify Sparta. Others insist it was very real and very regular. Whatever the truth, the fear it created was undeniable. And fear, in Sparta, is policy. Even the helots' freedom, when it comes, is twisted. In rare cases, if a helot performs exceptionally, saving a Spartan's life in battle, perhaps they may be granted symbolic freedom. But even then, they remain marked, labeled as freed helots, never fully accepted, always a footnote. Sometimes you wonder what they think. The helots, what do they say to each other in hushed tones at night? What do they dream of, if they're allowed dreams? Do they look at you with hatred, or just exhaustion? You'll never know, because if you ask, you've already crossed a line. One day, during inspection, you watch an old helot man guiding an ox through a vineyard. His back is crooked. His hands are gnarled like roots. But his eyes, still sharp. He meets your gaze for a second too long. You tighten your grip on your spear. He looks away. And just like that, the world spins on. Later, you mention the moment to your instructor. He nods slowly and says, "That's why we watch." Sparta teaches you many things. To be strong, to endure pain, to fight without fear. But perhaps its most enduring lesson Control is never given. It is enforced, and the helots are a mirror you're taught never to look into too long. It's just past midnight. The moon hangs high and pale over the quiet fields, casting long shadows between the rows of olive trees. You crouch low in the brush, your hand wrapped tightly round a dagger. Your breathing is slow, focused. You've been out here for hours waiting, watching. You're not training. You're on assignment, and your assignment tonight is murder. You've officially joined the Cryptia, now Sparta's secret police. The dark whisper behind the warrior glory. It's not a formal promotion, no ceremony, no helmet crest, just a quiet command from your elders. Go out, do your duty. And you know what that means. Find a helot, a specific one, a leader, perhaps, or someone who's gotten too bold. Someone who speaks a little too loudly when they think no Spartan is near. Someone who looks other men in the eyes too confidently. Then kill him, quietly. No witness, no trace, no questions. You don't bring a torch. You don't bring rations. You wear black. You sleep in the dirt, or not at all. You survive on stolen bread and rainwater. You don't speak, not even to yourself. This is isolation in its purest form. And the silence, the awful, vibrating silence, is where Sparta's darkest lessons live. One fringe account claims the Cryptia was created not just to terrorize the helots, but to refine young Spartans, to test their ability to kill without hesitation, without remorse, without being caught. A final exam in the art of Spartan warfare. Eliminate a target, blend into the night, and return to the barracks as if nothing happened. Other scholars argue about this, of course. Some think the whole thing was exaggerated by outsiders, part of an Athenian smear campaign to paint Spartans as brutal boogeymen. But too many sources mention it to dismiss it entirely. And you know it's real. You've done it. The first time is the hardest. You followed a man for us, a helot field worker, probably in his late 30s. He stopped to rest under a tree, humming softly to himself. Just a few notes. Nothing rebellious. Nothing loud. But he had a strong build, broad shoulders, a confident posture. Maybe he'd spoken too sharply to a landowner. Maybe someone reported him for stirring others up. It didn't matter. He was marked. You crept up behind him, heart pounding so loud you swore he'd hear it. He never turned around. You pressed the blade in quickly, cleanly. He fell forward into the dirt. No scream, just a soft thud and a trickle of blood into the thirsty soil. You stared for a moment longer than you should have. Then you left. Back in the barracks, no one asks you what happened. No one pats your back or hands you a medal. You eat your portion of black broth. You wash your hands. You fall asleep on your mat of reeds like any other night. And yet something inside you has changed. Killing in battle is different. It's loud. Public. Sometimes heroic. This is quiet. Cold. Intimate. There's no enemy line. No trumpet. Just a target. And a knife. Over the months, you're sent out again and again. Sometimes you're told who to find. Sometimes you choose. The instructions are always vague. Keep the helots humble. That's all. you start to understand the deeper strategy. It's not about punishment. It's about fear. The Helots never know when, or who, or why. They bury one of their own in the morning and wonder what rule he broke. The uncertainty is the point. And you're not just learning to kill. You're learning to vanish, to become part of the darkness, to strike without emotion and return without questions. Spartan warfare begins here, not on the battlefield, but in the shadows. One winter, you and 2 others are sent deep into the hills to observe potential troublemakers. That's the phrase they use. What it really means is, decide who dies. You camp in silence, wrapped in cloaks, fingers numb with cold. You watch a small Helot settlement through tree branches. Children laugh, old men chop wood. Women hang clothing on lines. One man stands out young, tall, organizing something near the edge of the village. A shipment of grain, maybe. You all know what the elders will think. Leadership, confidence, a future problem. He's marked before sunset. You move in before dawn. You do what's expected. Later, when the 3 of you return, one boy vomits in the bushes. Another stares blankly into a cooking fire. You don't say a word, because you can't say a word. The cryptia doesn't exist, officially, but everyone knows it does. Some Spartans admire it. Others pretend not to notice, even among the warrior elite. There's an unspoken fear of what the cryptia turns you into. And yet, you keep going, because this, too, is Sparta. You begin to move through the world differently. You notice small movements, sounds, patterns of silence. You become a walking weapon trained not just to fight, but to stalk, to predict, to erase. You don't smile often. You don't sleep deeply. And when a Helot looks your way with a flicker of rebellion in their eyes, you meet it with a gaze so blank, so steady, it makes them look away first. Because they know. They all know. The boy who once stole figs from the mess hall now kills for the system that punished him. And that, more than anything, proves the system works. You're 20 now. By most standards in the Greek world, you're an adult, a man, maybe even a respected one. You've endured the agony, completed your trials, and passed through the eerie silence of the cryptia. You've trained, you've bled, you've killed, and yet you're still not free, because in Sparta, even adulthood comes with a leash. You've officially joined the Sicida all-male communal mess group. That defines the rest of your adult life. Think of it as a permanent team, a brotherhood, a military dining club, and a state surveillance unit all rolled into one. It's not optional, it's not flexible, and it absolutely isn't fun. Every day, you eat with these men. Same time, same place, same food. You can't skip a meal, ever. If you do, without a very good excuse like actively dying, you risk losing your citizenship. That's right. One missed dinner, and you could be stripped of your political rights and branded unreliable. Imagine that. Decades of suffering and survival. Undone by a stomach flu. Each mess group includes about 15 members. You pay into it with supplies, wine, barley, cheese, figs, sometimes meat. If you can't contribute, you're out. It doesn't matter if you fought at Thermopylae or took 3 spears to the leg. No food, no seat. You sit in rank order. You speak sparingly. You laugh only when it doesn't disrupt the ritual. And the menu? You already know. Barley bread, figs, hard cheese, olives, and, of course, the ever-reliable Melis Zomos, that black broth made from pig's blood and vinegar. Even now, it refuses to get better. You chew, you swallow, you nod, you endure. You're not living with your wife yet. Not unless you're over 30. Until then, you sneak out after mess, under the cover of darkness, to spend a few brief hours with her, assuming the guards are in a good mood. And your unique leader isn't he watching. Even if you have children, you rarely see them. Spartan society believes children are the state's concern. Boys are absorbed into training by age 7. Girls are raised to be strong, to mock weakness, to give birth to warriors. You're a parent in name, but the city is the true father. Your house, minimal. You don't decorate. That's for Athenians with too much time. A simple hearth, maybe a stool or two. Walls of mud, brick, or stone. No art, no clutter. You own only what you can carry or what helps you fight. And even now, even with status and scars, your time is still not your own. You train daily, morning drills, afternoon marches, weapon practice until your arms go numb. You're expected to stay sharp, fit, ready, always. The state checks in, literally. Periodic inspections measure your strength, your skill, your posture. If you falter, you're shamed. If you age poorly, you're mocked. Weakness is treason, even in middle age. And your politics, still controlled. Sparta has kings, 2 of them. Actually, yes, 2 kings at once. One to lead in war, one to stay home. But you don't get to elect them. Your real political body is the Gerousia, the Council of Elders, all aged 60 and above. Only when you hit that age can you even dream of joining them. Until then, your voice in government is limited. You can vote in the Appella, the assembly of Spartan citizens, but even that is tightly orchestrated. Voting is done by shouting. No ballots, just yelling in favor of one policy or another. The loudest side wins. Sometimes officials even pretend one group shouted louder to push an agenda. Is it a democracy? Not quite. Is it tyranny? Not exactly. It's Sparta's strange hybrid of rigid control, warrior worship, and ritualized obedience. You patrol borders. You serve in outposts. You suppress helots when ordered. Occasionally, you go to war. Real war. The kind with dust and arrows and death that doesn't wait for a marching song. And you go proudly, because you've been told since you could walk. To die in battle is to live forever. But even that choice when to fight, when to fall, isn't really yours. The state decides. The elders command. You follow. The only time you might act of your own will is in training drills. A new boy flinches. You correct him. A fellow soldier slouches. You bark. You uphold the system, even if the system has swallowed you whole. Occasionally, though, a question slips through your mind. What would I do if no one was watching? You push it away, because someone is always watching. Even your sleep is still communal, even if the mats are thicker now. Even your dreams feel monitored, and your laughter when it happens is quieter. Like you're afraid the walls will report it. When a fellow soldier turns 60 and retires from combat duty, there's no grand ceremony. He just stops showing up to drills. Starts showing up at the council chambers instead. A quiet trade of spear for scroll. You envy him, sort of. He's still being watched, still being used, but now he's the one giving orders. Maybe someday you'll be there too. A wrinkled warrior in a red cloak, raising your hand to approve another round of brutal training for a boy who looks too much like you. But for now, you eat your barley, you polish your spear, you sit straight at mess. Home? Technically. Free? Never. You're standing in the middle of a sunlit training yard, sweat glistening on your shoulders, dust sticking to your skin. And yes, you're completely naked. It's not a punishment. It's just Tuesday in Sparta. Here, nudity isn't shameful. It's expected, admired. Even you train naked. You compete naked. You sometimes even parade naked. Modesty. That's for the Athenians with their complicated tunics and layers of fabric. In Sparta, your body is a reflection of your discipline, your power, your devotion to the state. So why hide it? You don't just accept this. You embrace it. Or at least, you try to. Because at first, stripping down in front of your entire unit is, let's be honest, deeply awkward. Especially when you're 13, sprouting hair in weird places, and trying to not look too obviously uncomfortable. But over time, something shifts. Your body becomes a tool, a thing to perfect, not hide. The others around you, they stop being individuals. They become part of the group. Muscle, motion, momentum. You see thighs, backs, shoulders, but not embarrassment, just unity. The gymnasium is open air, hot in the summer, freezing in the winter. The stones beneath your feet burn or bite depending on the season. You stretch, you wrestle, you sprint, all of it naked. The word gymnos in Greek literally means naked, by the way. So yes, you're working out in a gymnasium in the truest historical sense. And this isn't just a Spartan quirk. Other Greek cities did it too. But only Sparta turned it into a daily, mandatory experience. Because nudity here isn't just about comfort. It's about control. By being naked, you can't hide injuries, or flinch when touched, or wear padded gear to fake strength. The body tells all. Who's fast? Who's strong? Who's lacking discipline? Even spectators, yes. There are spectators walk the sidelines during festivals and contests. Judges, elders, trainers. All eyes are on you, not with lust, but with cold assessment. Are your calves symmetrical? Is your form clean? Are your abs appropriately stoic? Your instructors encourage oiling up before contests. Not for vanity though, let us not pretend. Spartans weren't he a little vain but to highlight muscle definition and reduce friction during wrestling. You rub the oil into your arms with practiced efficiency, trying not to slip on the polished stone floor. If you're caught slouching, showing poor form, or gaining a bit of unwanted pudge around the middle, you'll be mocked publicly. No food for a day, maybe two. Your name might even be etched onto the wall of laziness, yes. That was a real thing. According to some sources, a kind of permanent reminder that you dared to jiggle in a society built on statuesque stillness. Even the women participate. Not naked, but close. Spartan women train to. They wear short tunics or bare their legs entirely. They run, they jump, they throw javelins, and no one bats an eye. In fact, they're encouraged to do so. The belief is simple. Strong mothers make strong sons. And if you're not strong, you're ridiculed. One mother reportedly refused to speak to her son after he came back from war alive, but missing his shield. That was considered worse than death. Imagine what she'd say if he skipped leg day. Nudity even seeps into ceremonies. Religious dances, gymnastic displays, festivals in honor of gods like Apollo or Artemis. Participants might perform half-clothed or entirely nude, not to provoke, to honor the ideal, the human form as an offering. It's not sexual, or at least, it's not intended to be. It's ideological. You're not displaying yourself, you're displaying Sparta. And yes, there are jokes. The occasional slip on the gymnasium floor. The one time your best friend ripped something that should never be ripped mid-squat. Laughter happens, quietly, quickly, but mockery, only for weakness. Some outsiders visit Sparta and leave horrified. There are scrolls, written by travelers who describe Spartan nudity as barbaric, indecent, animalistic. They don't get it. They weren't raised here. They don't understand that when everyone's bare, no one feels bare. There's a theory that this enforced shamelessness served a double purpose. Not only did it harden you against embarrassment, it made you harder to interrogate. A man who isn't ashamed of being naked in front of a crowd isn't likely to break under pressure. And historians still arguing, as usual. Was this widespread, ritualized, exaggerated by later writers? Likely a mix of all three, but enough records survive to confirm Spartans were serious about their skin. And you've gotten used to it. Nudity becomes routine. You stretch under the early morning sky, your skin kissed by sun and shadow. You lunge, you lift, you leap. You notice the shape of your muscles changing, sharpening into something more statue than boy. You even start to admire it, not with arrogance, with clarity. This is you, the result of years of grit and training and pain. And for once, you're allowed to see it, to stand in the open, unhidden, and know that everything from your hardened soles to your sunburned shoulders is pure Spartan steel. You don't blush, you don't flinch, you walk across the yard, dust rising around your ankles like mist, and someone nods as you pass. No words, just that nod. It means you've arrived. She stands across from you with her arms crossed, eyes sharp, chin tilted ever so slightly upward. She's not wearing jewelry. Her tunic is simple, shorter than what women wear in most cities, but every inch of her posture screams confidence, authority, power. She's a Spartan woman, and she is not here for your nonsense. Forget what you know about ancient Greek women hidden behind curtains, weaving at looms, forbidden from speaking in public. That's Athens. In Sparta, women train. They own land. They shout back, and they're feared as much as they are admired. From the day she's born, a Spartan girl is raised with one goal: to become the mother of warriors. But don't confuse that with passivity. She exercises daily, runs, throws javelins, wrestles, not because she is expected to fight in battle, though she might if the city is ever invaded but because a strong body equals strong offspring. That's the logic. Crude, perhaps, but consistent with Spartan values. There is a saying often whispered with half a smirk: only Spartan women give birth to real men. Ouch. Girls train alongside boys, though their age is separate. They're taught to endure pain, to speak boldly, and to mock weakness. If a boy stumbles in the street, she might laugh and say, "That's the foot that's supposed to chase down enemies." Brutal, maybe, but that's the point. Spartan women are allowed to own property, something unheard of in most Greek cities. In fact, by some estimates, Spartan women controlled nearly 2/5 of the land. When their husbands were away marching, training, dying, they managed the estates, the harvests, the finances. They were not just homemakers, they were home rulers. But don't mistake autonomy for freedom. Spartan women are still tools of the state. Their bodies are monitored, their marriages arranged, their pregnancies tracked. The state doesn't care if she's happy, only that she produces strong sons. Daughters too, but mostly sons, soldiers. One peculiar ritual: marriage by ambush. You already experienced the man's side of it. Now here's hers. She's seized by other women friends, cousins, all ritual assistants. They cut her hair short, strip her, dress her in a man's cloak, leave her in a dark room. Then her new husband sneaks in at night, whispers nothing, and lies beside her like a ghost. That's the wedding. No gold, no garlands, just secrecy and state-sanctioned awkwardness. And yet, over time, many Spartan couples do form bonds. Deep ones, resilient ones. But these connections exist within the system, not outside it. A Spartan mother doesn't kiss scraped knees. She doesn't whisper, "It's okay. You don't have to fight." She says, "Come back with your shield ore on it." You've heard it before, maybe from your own mother. It isn't cruelty, it's culture. Even their speech is different. Spartan women are famous for their wit, their sarcasm, their laconic style, sharp words, short phrases, devastating impact. It's not unusual for a woman to publicly insult a man who underperforms in battle drills. And if he argues back, she'll probably win. One scroll records a scene where a Spartan woman was asked, "Why are you Spartan women the only ones who rule over your men?" She replied, "Because we are the only ones who give birth to men." Mic drop. And yet, while their words carry weight, their rights are still limited. They can't vote, can't hold public office. Their power is informal, social, domestic, tactical. Their lives are shaped, controlled, and measured by reproduction. If a woman fails to conceive, she's a disappointment to her family and to the state. Some are quietly passed over, replaced in marriage alliances. Others might be assigned to different husbands, with whispers of better seed or stronger wombs. It's not romantic. It's clinical. There's also a quiet pressure to produce multiple children. One son is not enough. 2 is acceptable. 3, a point of pride. There were even rare cases where an unmarried Spartan woman could be temporarily assigned to a warrior for the purpose of conception. State-approved matchmaking, minus the romance. And yet there's something undeniably fierce about them. They walk tall, speak loud, laugh fully. They attend festivals, sing in choruses, dance in public. You'll see them exchanging barbs with older men, shouting advice during athletic contests, or commanding their households with military precision. Some visitors to Sparta found this deeply unsettling. Athenian travelers, in particular, wrote scathing criticisms of Spartan women, calling them shameless, manlike, wild. But those criticisms usually said more about the writers than the women themselves. Historians still debate whether this independence was real or overstated. Some argue it was limited to elite women. Others believe it was widespread, deeply woven into the Spartan social fabric. But one thing's clear: Spartan women were not invisible. You remember watching your mother lift a basket of stone-ground barley, one arm cradling a newborn, the other shouting instructions to Helot servants. She never looked tired, just focused. She didn't hug often, but her presence was a force field. And now, when you march into battle, you carry her words in your head like a second shield. Because Spartan women may not fight with swords, but they make sure you never forget why you carry one. You sit down cross-legged on the cold stone floor. Around you, 15 other men do the same, silent, upright, disciplined. There are no tables, no silver platters, just one large, blackened cauldron in the center. Steam rising slowly from it like the breath of something ancient and unfriendly. Tonight's dinner is the same as last night, and the night before that. Melizomos, black broth. You've trained in full armor under the burning sun. You've marched for miles barefoot. You've wrestled in freezing mud, and yet nothing tests your endurance quite like this bowl of misery. The recipe, simple, but in a horrifying way. Boil pig's blood, add a slab of fatty pork, toss in some vinegar, a generous pinch of salt. Let it bubble until it reaches the color of night and the consistency of melted despair. Serve lukewarm. Smile not included. You raise the bowl. Inhale. Big mistake. It smells metallic, sour, like old coins soaked in smoke. Some nights it leans more toward pork. Other nights, more toward just death. One scholar wrote that it tasted like courage curdled with regret. Another called it soup for the soul. If your soul owed you money, you take a sip. Thick, salty, slippery. There's a hint of meat, but mostly it's blood. It coats your tongue, sits in your stomach like a threat. Still you eat it, because to not eat it is worse. Melizomos is a ritual, not a meal. It's the glue of Spartan discipline. Every full citizen eats it together, every night. In the Syssitia, your military mess hall group, refusing it, disrespecting it, that's not a food complaint. That's a political crime. Once, during a festival, a visiting diplomat from Sybaris was offered black broth. He took one bite and gagged. The room fell silent. Someone muttered, "Our enemies gagged too." He wasn't invited back. Another story tells of a foreigner who asked for a taste. The Spartan cook replied, "You must first bathe in the Eurotas, the river, and fight 3 wars. Only then will your tongue be worthy." Historians still argue whether Melizomos was actually that revolting, or if it became a kind of culinary myth. exaggerated by both Spartans and their enemies. But bones don't lie. Analysis of Spartan remains shows high sodium and iron intake, likely from blood-heavy stews. So yes, it was real. And it was gross. You chase the broth with barley bread, dry, dense. More useful as a weapon than a snack. It crumbles when you try to tear it. Still you chew, slowly, carefully. Washing it down with diluted wine that tastes like someone whispered a grape near some rainwater. And that's dinner every night. Same spot, same bowl, same silence. If someone speaks too much, they're shushed. If someone laughs, they're stared down. Meals are not for bonding. They are for enduring together. A test of composure and discipline. Your mess leader is the oldest man in the group. He decides when you can leave, when to raise your cup, when to speak. You respect him, don't fear him. Try not to make eye contact when your gag reflex kicks in. Sometimes, just for fun. Someone brings in boiled turnips. That's considered a treat. Occasionally, you dream about figs. Honey, cheese that doesn't squeak when you bite it. You once heard that Athenians eat roasted lamb with garlic and herbs. You imagined it, then felt guilty, then felt hungry again. When you were younger, you tried to season your melazomos by sneaking in a crushed olive leaf. You were caught, flogged, not for theft, but for undermining tradition. Because that's what this is, a tradition, a symbol. This isn't just food. It's Spartan identity in a bowl. Gritty, bleak, utterly humorless. The taste of war, the flavor of control. You once asked a mentor why the broth never changes. He replied, because the enemy doesn't. Hard to argue with that logic. Terrifyingly poetic. You glance around. Everyone is slurping quietly, some with eyes closed, some grimacing subtly. No one dares leave a drop. Afterward, the bowls are rinsed, the room is swept, and everyone returns to their place on the reed mats, ready to rest or train or run 5 miles depending on which instructor bursts through the door next. You lie back and feel the broth sit heavy in your belly, a familiar weight, like armor from the inside. One day, you think, maybe you'll grow used to it. Then you laugh, softly, just to yourself, because you know you never will. You wake up and the first thing you do before blinking, before stretching, before even breathing too deeply is check your abs. Still there, still hard, still sore. Perfect. In Sparta, physical appearance isn't just vanity, it's ideology. Every sinew, every cut of muscle, every tight contour of your body is a reflection of discipline, control, and devotion to the state. You are expected to look like a living statue carved by an angry god with a 6-pack fetish. And that expectation isn't subtle. From the moment you could walk, you've been scrutinized, shoulders too narrow, posture too lazy, midsection a little soft. That could mean fewer rations, or extra drills, or, in some extreme cases, public mockery. Your instructors don't use phrases like core strength. They say things like your torso is your shield or flab invites spears. Motivation, Spartan style. You don't go to the gym. The world is your gym. Hills. Mud pits. Rope bridges. Weighted sprints through thorn bushes. You carry logs, wrestle goats, do squats while holding bronze helmets full of water. It's all functional training. No machines, no mirrors, just pain, sweat, and protein-free suffering. Want soap? Sorry, not in your hygiene budget. In fact, bathing is rare, very rare. Soap is seen as soft. Baths are infrequent. When you do wash, it's usually in cold river water. And even that feels like cheating. One scroll claims Spartans bathed just enough not to offend the gods. Smell? Irrelevant. Dirt? Normal. You're not here to look pretty. You're here to look deadly. And yet, the obsession with physical form borders on ridiculous. It's not just fitness, it's aesthetic war. At festivals, you're expected to strip to the waist or lower. Dance contests, religious displays, foot races, all shirtless, glistening, oiled up like war-ready butter sculptures. You flex without flexing. You strike poses without. Calling them poses, everyone pretends they don't notice. But you all notice. There's even a bit of friendly judgment. If your back is slightly hunched, if your thighs jiggle during a sprint, someone will say something. Quietly, cruelly, the worst insult. You walk like a helot. Ouch. The diet doesn't help. You're on a strict ration of barley, olives, figs, and black broth. No sugar, no fancy sauces, no snacks. Occasionally, someone will sneak in a roasted locust or dried fruit, if caught. You lose a day's meals. Fair trade, sometimes. Protein, scarce. Muscle maintenance becomes a kind of magic trick. How do you look like a sculpture while eating like a goat? Answer: constant motion, push-ups, hundreds, sit-ups, thousands. You race up hills backward. You carry fellow soldiers on your back just because it builds bond trust. One drill involves holding a plank until a priest finishes reciting an entire hymn. That's 7 minutes on a good day. And then there are the body checks. Once a month, the elders inspect trainees like prized horses. They don't say much, just frown, nod, occasionally prod a shoulder blade. If they say acceptable, you sleep better that night. If they say tighten the gut, you spend the next week doing ab drills until you cry. Out loud? No, never out loud. Sometimes you wonder if it's worth it. All the crunches, all the silent shame when your cloak clings a little too much around the middle. But then you remember, Sparta doesn't reward effort. It rewards outcome. Even the art reflects this. Spartan statues are different, less decorative, more muscular, realistic to the point of discomfort. Some say the original Greek god body ideal started here, then got exported to the rest of Greece with a little extra polish. Athens turned it into beauty. Sparta kept it as warning. Even your relaxation has structure. You don't lie on couches. You kneel in meditation or stand in stillness. Leisure is considered a liability. Your heart rate is supposed to be at a controlled thrum, never a lazy flutter. One elder tells you, the body is a spear. If it bends, it breaks. You don't forget that. But here's the wildest part. You start to like it. Not the soreness, not the bland food or the foot blisters, but the way your body obeys you now. The strength, the precision. You move with purpose. You breathe on a rhythm. You can carry your weight and someone else's. You once overheard an outsider call the Spartans vain. You nearly laughed. Vanity is about appearance. Sparta is about readiness. Every muscle earned. Every scar honored. Your body is not a canvas. It's a contract. So yes, you check your ABS in the morning. Not for pride, but to confirm you're still dangerous. The sun rises, and the first sound you hear is the clash of metal spears tapping shields in perfect rhythm, like thunder practiced into song. This isn't a drill. This is war. And in Sparta, war isn't a duty. It's a privilege. You were raised on its myths, fed stories of heroes who died with arrows in their ribs and smiles on their faces. You recited the names of men who returned with their shield or on it. Now, it's your turn. Your cloak is crimson, not for fashion, but to hide blood yours or others. Your hair, long and oiled, is tied back neatly. Your armor is clean, but not polished. Spartans aren't here to shine. They're here to survive gloriously. You stand shoulder to shoulder with your brothers. Your phalanx formation so tight you feel their heartbeats through the bronze. One step forward, and the line moves as one. You are not a man. You are a wall. The trumpets sound. Your heart doesn't flutter. It pounds once slow, heavy, final. Then the march begins. The battlefield is not a place for fear. Not in Sparta. Fear is natural. Yes, but it must be hidden, controlled, dismissed. You don't flinch when the first arrow sings through the sky. You raise your shield with perfect timing, a movement practiced since you were 10. Across from you, enemies. It doesn't matter who .thebans.argives.Persians. They all blur together once the fight begins. Spear forward, shield up, step, strike, reset, again. The rhythm is everything. You don't think, you react. You move with the line. If the man beside you stumbles, you hold tighter. If he falls, you close the gap without blinking. There's no glory in panic, only in position. If you die, it must be beautiful. Not flailing, not retreating. A clean, controlled fall with your spear still in hand. Your eyes unblinking, your back unturned. Retreat is not just dishonor, it is obliteration. A Spartan who deserts the line is stripped of his citizenship, forbidden to marry, mocked in the streets, shunned by family. Some say death is kinder, others say it's required. You've seen it once. A man young, promising broke formation in a skirmish. The enemy pressed too hard, and he stepped back. Just once. 1 foot. He survived the battle, but Sparta did not forgive him. He returned to silence. His name vanished from rolls. No one greeted him at mess. His mother refused to acknowledge him in public. At the next festival, he stood alone while boys threw figs at his feet. He left the city within a week. No one speaks his name anymore, because in Sparta, you don't just fight for your life. You fight for your identity. Even the wounded are judged. If your injuries are in the front your chest, your arms, your face you're honored, bandaged with reverence. Praised. If your wounds are in the back, your story becomes complicated. Was it strategy or shame? Historians debate how absolute these codes were. Some believe the Spartans exaggerated them for propaganda. Others insist they were enforced with brutal consistency. But the message was clear. Glory lives in the charge, not in the retreat. And glory is everything. It buys your name a place on stone. It earns your family honor. It ensures your children, if the state allows you any, will grow up in good favor. Glory is the currency of Spartan eternity. But it's a narrow road. Fall in battle. You are carried back on your shield, body straight, eyes closed. Your cloak becomes your burial shroud. Your name is sung during the Gymnopedia dance festival where boys move in formation. Honoring warriors with every step. Survive with honor. You become a mentor, a trainer, a symbol. Survive with shame. You become a warning. And yet, you're not here to calculate outcomes. You're here because this is what you were made for. Since your first whip mark, since your first black broth, since your first stolen fig, you were trained for this, sculpted, hardened, told no, promised that dying well is better than living quietly. There's a strange comfort in that. No more questions, no more decisions, just the sound of metal, the weight of your shield, the smell of dust, sweat, and inevitability. You raise your spear, the line advances, and for a moment, everything else disappears. You've heard the story. Everyone has. Thermopylae, the narrow pass, the hot gates. 300 Spartans standing shoulder to shoulder against waves of Persian soldiers. Spears flashing, shields shattering. A king who refuses to kneel. The final charge into death and legend. It's the kind of tale they tell with lowered voices and shining eyes. The moment where Sparta became myth. And you, sitting on a cracked stone bench years later, wonder quietly, how much of it is true? Here's what you know. In 480 BCE, Persia massive, wealthy, terrifying marched west with a force so large the ground probably trembled under their sandals. King Xerxes demanded submission. Most Greek city-states either complied or panicked. But Sparta sent Leonidas, 300 warriors, his personal guard, each man selected not just for strength but for having sons already. That detail? It matters. These men weren't just brave, they were expendable. They stood at Thermopylae, a narrow coastal pass, where the terrain erased the Persians' numbers advantage. The cliffs to one side, the sea to the other, and just enough room for a tightly packed phalanx to hold the line. And for 3 days, they did. The story says they fought like demons, that they broke rank only to push deeper, that when their spears shattered, they fought with swords. When their swords broke, they used their fists, their teeth. Leonidas died on the 3rd day, but not before becoming a symbol that would echo across millennia. You've memorized every name. You've practiced the formations. You've even walked the path on a ceremonial march, feeling the same hot wind whip across your face. The story is burned into your bones. But here's what the stories often leave out. They weren't alone. In fact, over 7,000 Greek troops initially stood with the Spartans, Thespians, Thebans, and others. When the Persians flanked the pass via a mountain trail thanks to a local traitor, most of those troops retreated on Leonidas's orders. But a few stayed, among them 700 Thespians who weren't obligated to stay, who died alongside the Spartans without statues or epics or Hollywood movies. And the Thebans, some say they surrendered. Others say they were forced to remain and had no real loyalty to the cause. Historians still argue whether they fought to the death or tried to save face by switching sides. Another missing detail? Sparta almost didn't show up. The battle fell during the Carnia, a sacred religious festival. The laws forbade military action during that time. Leonidas went anyway with a personal guard, not the full army. It was a compromise, a way to sort of obey tradition while not completely abandoning the Greek alliance. In other words, Thermopylae wasn't just bravery, it was politics. You start to see that the version told to the boys in the Agagita version where Sparta stood alone, fought purely for honor, and died smiling isn't the whole truth. It's cleaner, more inspiring, but not complete. The real Thermopylae was messy, tactical, strategic, a delaying action, not a final stand. Designed to slow Xerxes down long enough for the rest of Greece to rally, which worked eventually. But even so, something real did happen there. 300 Spartans, outnumbered, exhausted, knowing they would die, and choosing to fight anyway. Whatever political calculation sent them there, it was individual resolve that held the line. They died, not just as warriors, but as examples. And Sparta made sure that example echoed for centuries. Back home, their names were carved into stone. Their families were elevated in status. Their sacrifice became the gold standard of what it meant to be Spartan, fearless, disciplined, obedient unto death. But here's the twist. Most Spartan battles weren't like Thermopylae. They were slower, tactical, less heroic, more practical. Sparta preferred to win with formation and intimidation, with control. Most battles were about endurance, not glory. They avoided unnecessary conflict, used allies when they could, and negotiated more than the myths admit. In fact, many Spartan campaigns were long, tedious affairs involving months of sieges, supply line management, and good old-fashioned staring contests across valleys. But Thermopylae? That was the exception, and Sparta loved it because it was. It gave the state a story, a slogan, a reason to say to every new recruit, you are not training for yourself. You are training to be like them. And you believed it. Still do, if you're honest. Because whatever the politics, the myths, the missing footnotes, they stood their ground and died on it. And when you stand in that same dusty wind, centuries later, spear in hand, facing your own unknowns, you hope that if your moment comes, you'll stand too. Pain in Sparta isn't just something you endure, it's something you politicize. From the moment you first stumbled barefoot across sharp pebbles in the Agage, you were being shaped, not just into a soldier, but into a statement. Because in Sparta, pain isn't merely a byproduct of training. It's policy. Your body is evidence. Your scars are proof. Your ability to stand through exhaustion, hunger, heat, and beatings without complaint. That's your civic resume. But none of it is accidental. Sparta uses pain. It organizes it, distributes it, weaponizes it, not just to build soldiers, but to build a society where obedience runs so deep it feels like instinct. And who decides the dosage? The Gerousia, the Council of Elders, a group of 28 men over 60 years old, plus the two kings, who control laws. trials, punishments, and even proposals to the assembly. They're the engineers of the system, the authors of austerity. You don't see them often, but you feel them everywhere. Like the wind, you can't touch it, but it shapes everything around you. They're the ones who keep the agage cruel. They're the ones who approve surprise inspections, regulate food rations, decide how often to flog a trainee just to see who'll cry. They'll never say it that plainly. Of course, they use terms like discipline, balance, tradition. But behind the ceremony, there's strategy. Pain keeps you alert. Fear keeps you obedient. Hunger keeps you humble. Some historians argue Sparta was the first true surveillance state, not with cameras or microphones, but with a population trained to observe, report, and judge one another constantly. Everyone is both soldier and spy. Even your closest friend might correct your form during a march. Not because he cares, but because someone else is watching. The Ephors, 5 powerful magistrates elected yearly, also play a role. They can summon kings, put citizens on trial, oversee education. Their reach is immense, and they're big fans of pain, particularly when it's applied in just the right amounts to maintain control. You begin to notice it around you more clearly the older you get. A younger boy gets whipped not for stealing, but because the elders need to tighten discipline this month. A helot is executed during Cryptea's season not because he rebelled, but because someone needs to disappear to keep the rest in line. A woman is berated in the Agora not for any real offense, but because her posture lacked pride, a public warning, dressed as a correction. The politics of pain isn't about justice. It's about message control. Even rewards are laced with hurt. Win a contest? Congratulations now carry rocks uphill as a test of humility. Excel in a foot race. Expect 3 days of harder drills. Glory makes you visible. And visibility in Sparta is just another target. The system pretends to reward strength, but it truly rewards submission. Not silence, but calculated silence. The kind that knows when to nod, when to grimace, and when to bleed with dignity. There is a fringe theory whispered by modern historians that much of Spartan culture was designed not to create super soldiers, but to create symbols. Warriors who looked perfect, who moved in unison, who heard exactly when and how they were told. One might even say the Spartan war machine wasn't really about winning battles, it was about sustaining the image of a society too hard to break. And yet, cracks always show. Even in Sparta, you hear rumors. A soldier too exhausted to train collapses. His request for rest is denied. He dies 2 days later. No ceremony, just a shrug from the elders. A trainee sneaks extra bread to a younger boy. They're both punished equally, because kindness disrupts the hierarchy. A foreign guest watches a flogging ritual and asks, why don't they fight back? No one answers, because everyone already knows. Fighting back would hurt more. But some Spartans do wonder deep down, in places they never speak of, is all this pain making us better, or just hollow? After all, when the drills end and the cloaks are folded and the torches are out, what remains? A soldier or a shell? You lie awake some nights and listen to your own heartbeat. It sounds like marching. It always has. You feel your scars and trace their stories, each one with a lesson, each one approved by someone sitting comfortably in a chamber you'll never enter. Because pain may be your currency, but they print the money. You stand beneath a massive statue of Apollo, torchlight flickering over polished marble. Around you, soldiers kneel in silence, heads bowed, mouths shut, not from fear, but from respect. And maybe a little superstition, because in Sparta, religion isn't something soft or poetic. It's a force invisible, ever present, and woven into every law, meal, and battle cry. To be Spartan is to believe, and to obey, not blindly, ritually. You don't argue with the gods. You don't question signs. You just watch the sky, wait for omens, and adjust your plans accordingly. You've seen war campaigns delayed not because of bad weather or missing supplies, but because of a bad omen from the priest. A sneeze at the wrong moment, a goat's liver with the wrong texture, a bird flying left instead of right. The gods speak in symbols, and Sparta listens. One time, your unit was ready to march to war. Armor polished, spears sharp, adrenaline high. But the sacrificed room's entrails twisted in the wrong direction. You stayed in camp for 2 days, drilled in silence, waited. When the next room's insides looked favorable, you marched, and no one rolled their eyes. Because in a place where everything is structured, divine disorder is taken very seriously. You grow up hearing stories of gods who reward strength and punish pride. Apollo, Artemis, Athena, all treated not with warmth, but with strategy. You don't just worship them, you negotiate with them through offerings, dances, chants, and blood. Yes, blood. Sacrifices are common before battles, before festivals, before anything important. Animals, mostly goats or pigs, are offered to win divine favor. Their entrails are studied like maps. You learn to read them better than letters. And if the gods are displeased, you do not move. Even kings bow to this. Once, during the Persian Wars, the full Spartan army couldn't deploy because the Carnea festival sacred to Apollo was in session. The priests said no, the people said no, even though Persia was advancing. So instead, Leonidas was sent with a personal guard of 300 men. Not a full army, a compromise between law and necessity. That's how serious Sparta takes divine timing. And then there are the Delphic oracles, the mysterious priestesses who sit atop a volcanic vent, inhaling fumes and muttering riddles. Sparta consults them before major decisions. Wars, alliances, reforms. The answers are often cryptic, like, "A mighty kingdom shall fall," which is about as helpful as a broken compass. Still, Sparta listens. Even law reforms were once blessed or delayed by omens from Delphi. The most famous lawgiver, Lycurgus, supposedly shaped the Spartan system after visiting the oracle and receiving divine approval. Historians still debate whether Lycurgus even existed, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that Sparta believes it, and belief here shapes reality. Religion isn't just for temples. It's in training drills, where songs are sung to Artemis. It's in meal rituals, where wine is poured out before the first sip. It's even in childbirth, where prayers are chanted to ensure the baby will be strong and male. You remember one night, before battle, kneeling in a circle round a fire. A priest scattered barley grains and watched the smoke rise. The breeze shifted. He nodded. "That's a good sign," he whispered. Everyone exhaled. But religion here isn't gentle. There's no softening, no forgiving goddess waiting with open arms. The gods of Sparta are sharp, distant, tactical. Take Artemis Orthia, for example. You know her temple well. That's where boys are whipped publicly until they faint or worse as part of religious rites. Pain is her offering, endurance, her worship, and the festivals. Brutal. The Hyacinthia blends mourning and celebration. It starts somber, honoring a young man accidentally killed by Apollo, but ends with feasting and joy. Life and death in one event. Because Sparta never lets you forget how quickly one becomes the other. Then there's the Gymnopedia, a festival of dance and endurance. Boys, youths, and men perform in the sweltering heat. Bodies glistening, not for applause but to honor the fallen. Their movements tell stories of battles, of discipline, of loss. You danced in it once. 3 hours straight, legs burning, eyes fixed on the sun, the rhythm echoing in your skull for days. And afterward, no celebration, just nods of approval, a silent meal, and sleep that felt like surrender. Religion and state are one in Sparta. You don't choose your beliefs. You perform them, collectively, constantly. You live in a city that trusts ritual more than reason. That checks the stars before signing treaties. That delays invasions because a priest tripped over a stool, and you don't question it. Because in Sparta, even doubt is dangerous. You learn to carry your superstition quietly, like a knife or a charm. You tie a red string around your wrist before war, not because it's magic, but because it might be. You never eat figs before a festival. You don't whistle at night. You don't cross the temple threshold with your left foot first. Little things. Tiny rules. But rules nonetheless. Because gods watch, and Sparta watches harder. You're walking through the Agora Sparta's modest public square when you spot it. A small clay sculpture, rough and lopsided, depicting a warrior mid-sprint. You pause, not because it's beautiful, but because it's one of the only pieces of art you've seen in weeks. See, in Sparta, art isn't forbidden. It's just sidelined, ignored, deprioritized in the way one ignores dessert when training for war. Other cities, Athens, especially, overflow with paintings, plays, poetry, and statues so lifelike they seem ready to sigh. Sparta? Not so much. You don't paint murals on your walls. You don't commission busts of your ancestors. You don't sit in stone amphitheaters pondering the tragic downfall of mythical kings. You train. You eat. You bleed. You serve. Art is not the point. And if it is, it better help you win a battle. There was a time early Sparta, centuries ago, when the city-state flirted with sculpture, pottery, even a little lyric poetry. A man named Titius, for example, wrote marching verses that Spartans still chant today. Not delicate sonnets, war songs. One line says, "Let each man hold his ground, biting his lip with teeth, catchy, grim." Very Spartan. But once the full militarized system kicked in, creativity took a backseat. Then it was locked in a trunk. Then it was tossed into a ditch behind the temple and forgotten. The reason: art distracts. Art opens the door to emotion, and emotion softens you. At least, that's the philosophy. Why spend hours painting when you could be training? Why sculpt a hero when you could become one? So the city keeps it simple. Buildings, functional. Low stone walls, minimal decoration. No Corinthian columns. No dramatic pediments. Just enough to keep the roof up. Music, basic, mostly flutes and war pipes. Used for marching, not melody. If a tune gets too pretty, someone will probably rewrite it to include yelling. Theatre, almost non-existent. While Athenians debate whether Oedipus is morally responsible for his downfall, you're busy trying to perfect your phalanx spacing. Philosophy? Cute idea. The Spartans famously expelled a foreign philosopher once for talking too much. There's even a story possibly exaggerated about a Spartan boy who, when asked what philosophy was, said, "Words that make weakness sound clever." You don't write poems. You write reports, if that. And if your handwriting is too elegant, someone might accuse you of going soft. Even in religious ceremonies, art is minimized. Offerings are plain, statues are stiff. No flowing robes or dimpled smiles, just gods standing still, arms at their sides, looking like they're waiting to be judged. And yet, you do feel something when you pass the gymnasium and hear the chorus of boys chanting Tyrtaeus verses. You do admire the raw lines of a perfectly forged shield, the quiet pride in a spear balanced just right. You do recognize beauty in motion, in symmetry, in scars that form clean diagonals across muscle. So maybe Sparta has art, just not the kind with paint brushes. The body is art. The formation is choreography. The battlefield, a canvas of courage and control. Every movement you make is sculpted by years of pain and posture. Every step is placed precisely. Even your stillness has structure, but it's not expressive. It's declarative. Other cities sculpt emotions. Sparta enforces silence. You sometimes wonder what it would be like to see a real play, to sit in a dark theater and hear someone cry on purpose, to hear laughter that isn't muffled, to feel without permission. But that's not your path. You are not here to imagine. You are here to embody. Still, sometimes late at night, when the fire crackles just right and the wine flows a little warmer, an older warrior might hum a tune from his youth, a forbidden song, a story half remembered, a line of poetry his mother whispered once before she told him to stop being sentimental. And in those moments, you realize something strange. Even Sparta, in all its armor and grit and law, can't fully erase the human ache for expression. It can bury it, punish it, starve it, but it's still there, quiet, waiting, watching you march past with your shield, your spear, and your heart clenched like a fist. You're older now, not old. Exactly, but the lines around your eyes have settled in like cracks in a well-used shield. Your movements are still sharp, your posture still rigid. But something shifted. It's not in your legs or your lungs. It's in the air. Something is changing in Sparta. You feel it in the way people glance at each other before speaking, In the way helots whisper a little more freely at dusk. In the way foreign merchants smirk just a little when they think no one's watching. Sparta, the unbreakable, is beginning to bend. But it's not a collapse. Not yet. It's more like watching an enormous stone statue slowly tilt. Over centuries slow, quiet, almost invisible until you realize it's no longer standing straight. How does a society like Sparta decline? Answer: from the inside out. The first crack: numbers. Too few Spartans. The rigid system that built the most feared warriors in Greece also limited who could become one. You had to be born of citizen parents, pass brutal inspections, survive training, afford mess contributions, and maintain peak physical shape for decades. That's a narrow pipeline, and over time, it got narrower. One war here, one famine there. A few scandals involving failed rites of passage, and suddenly, the elite citizen class is shrinking. Badly. By the time you're in your 40s, full-blood Spartans known as the Spartiates number only in the thousands. For a city-state that dominates an entire region, that's dangerously low. And the ones outside this core class, perioikoi-free, but not full citizens. They trade, build, and serve, but can't vote. Helots enslaved masses, still the majority. The balance tips. And the helots? They notice. You start hearing about uprisings. Not whispers anymore, actual revolts. Armed ones. Whole villages rising up, torching fields, ambushing patrols. One helot rebellion in particular, after a massive earthquake, almost topples Sparta entirely. You remember the terror, the scrambling, the realization that your cloak doesn't stop pitchforks. The state responds brutally. But it's a reaction, not a strategy. Fear starts to replace pride. And then there's wealth. Spartans aren't supposed to love money. That was the point. Lycurgus outlawed gold and silver coinage, replacing it with bulky iron bars hard to steal. Harder to hoard, but over time, wealth creeps back in. After Sparta defeats Athens in the Peloponnesian War, treasure flows in, spoils, tribute, foreign admiration, and with it, corruption. Suddenly, some Spartans live a little better. Their mess groups eat slightly finer meals. Their homes grow slightly larger. Their sons avoid slightly harsher punishments. No one says it out loud, but equality starts to unravel. Some citizens begin buying influence, paying for armor upgrades, hosting discreet feasts. That red cloak, still symbolic, but its edges are now embroidered, barely noticeable, but enough to make the next man look lesser. The Ephors and the Jerusalem's pillars of austere governance begin to squabble. Some side with conservative elders, trying to claw the state back to its roots. Others see the writing on the wall and start making alliances, strategic marriages, secret deals, mercenary contracts. Yes, mercenaries. Sparta, once proud of needing no outside help, begins hiring foreign fighters, because there are no longer enough Spartans to fill the ranks. That's when you really know. When the phalanx beside you doesn't speak your dialect. When he asks for payment in gold. When his shield is a little too polished, and his eyes don't hold the same fire. And then, one day, Thebes defeats Sparta. You're stunned, not just by the loss, but by how fast it happens. In 371 BCE, at Leuctra, Spartan arrogance meets Theban innovation. The Spartans, rigid information and mindset, face off against a new idea, flexibility. The Theban general Epaminondas stacks his troops in an unusually deep column on one flank, targeting the Spartan elite head-on. Sparta, expecting the same tired battle tactics it's dominated for centuries, walks right into it. And the unthinkable happens. Sparta loses. Not just the battle, but its aura of invincibility. Spartiate's full Spartan citizens fall in the hundreds, and unlike other cities, Sparta can't easily replace them. Every death isn't just a casualty. It's a structural collapse. A fatherless line, an empty shield, a mess group without a contributor. You remember standing in the square when the news arrived. No tears, no screaming, just a long silence that felt heavier than grief. Then came the murmurs. What now? For the first time in generations, Sparta is no longer feared. Not like before. Helots grow bolder. Rivals smell blood. Even allies begin to distance themselves. The rigid system that once held everything together now begins to crack under its own weight. But Sparta doesn't reform. It tightens. More restrictions, more surveillance, more rituals to recall the good old days. It doubles down on black broth and flogging rituals, as if performing the past will revive its power. Boys are trained harder, rules get stricter, whippings more frequent. But it doesn't work, because the world is changing and Sparta refuses to change with it. Other Greek states experiment with politics, with trade, with culture. Athens rebuilds into a philosophical powerhouse. Thebes rises. Even Macedon, under a young prince named Alexander, begins whispering ambitions far beyond Greece. And Sparta, it stands still, still proud, still hard, still isolated, but alone. Eventually, the once great phalanxes are too thin to field. Foreign commanders no longer fear the red cloaks. Spartan warriors are hired out as elite bodyguards or mercenaries sold, in a sense, like the values they once embodied. Even you stoic, disciplined, loyal to the marrow begin to feel it. You look around your mess group and realize half the men are gone, some dead, some dishonored, some just gone. Your back aches more, your hair grays, your mind, once quick to recall verses from Tyrtaeus, now wanders into quiet doubts. Not about what you did, but about what was never allowed. There's a growing emptiness in the rituals. The same songs, the same drills, but fewer voices, less conviction. You wonder if the boys now training in the Agage so much younger than you ever remember being feel the weight of the same myths, or if, beneath their scarred backs and blank expressions, they're wondering the same thing. Is this still Sparta? Or just a memory in motion? The city hasn't fallen. It still exists. But it's no longer the tip of the spear. It's the shadow. And you're part of that shadow. Still walking tall, but quieter.